Imagine a world where the sky has never broken. For generations, humanity has known only the steady rhythm of the earth, the predictability of the seasons, and a soil watered by a thick, rising mist. Now, picture one man standing in the middle of a dry, dusty valley, staring up at a cloudless horizon, listening to a voice that commands him to prepare for the end of the world. This is the story of an impossible warning, a project of monumental madness, and the day the oceans rose to meet the heavens. It is the narrative of Noah, a man caught between the ridicule of his neighbors and the unyielding decree of the divine, building a life raft for the future of creation while the world around him laughed itself to death. The warning did not come with thunder or a shattering of the earth. It came in the quiet, terrifying clarity of a divine command. The world had grown loud, fractured by violence, corruption, and a systemic decay that had turned the cradle of humanity into a wilderness of cruelty. In the midst of this moral static, Noah walked in step with the Creator, a solitary figure of integrity in a generation that had lost its compass. The instruction was precise, staggering in its scope, and entirely absurd to the human mind. Build an ark of gopher wood, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. It was to be a massive three-tiered chest of timber, sealed inside and out with pitch, designed not to navigate the seas, but merely to float above a destruction that no living soul could yet conceive. To understand the weight of Noah's task, you have to picture the sheer mechanics of the construction. There were no shipyards, no massive lumber mills, and no oceans nearby to launch such a colossus. For decades, the valley echoed with the rhythmic strike of axes against wood, the groaning of ancient trees falling to the earth, and the heavy thud of timber being dragged across the dirt. Noah and his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became builders of a ghost ship in a desert. Every beam laid, every wooden pin driven into place, and every coat of black, foul-smelling tar applied to the hull was a physical manifestation of an unseen reality. It was an agonizingly slow process, a monument of faith built stroke by stroke under a burning sun that mocked the very idea of a flood. But the physical labor was only half the burden. The psychological weight was crushing. A structure of that magnitude cannot be hidden, and soon the ark became a local spectacle, a tourist attraction of ridicule. Neighbors, travelers, and mockers would gather at the perimeter of the build site, pointing and laughing at the old man who claimed the skies would one day swallow the dry land. Noah did not merely build in silence. He became a preacher of righteousness, his very life and labor serving as a megaphone to a cynical public. With every warning he uttered, he pleaded with them to turn from their violence, to recognize the rot in their culture, and to seek mercy before the window of grace slammed shut. But his words were treated as the delusions of a fanatic, swallowed up by the laughter of a society too busy living for the moment to see the horizon shifting. As the decades bled into one another, the ark grew from a skeletal frame into a towering, dark mountain of wood. The mockery likely turned into a dull, familiar background noise, a staple of local gossip. People grew numb to the warning, convinced that because tomorrow looked exactly like yesterday, the future was secure. They ate, they drank, they married, and they bought and sold, completely blind to the fact that their reality was hanging by a thread. Noah's warning wasn't just about water. It was a mirror held up to a society that had institutionalized cruelty and forgotten its purpose. The tragedy wasn't that they couldn't see the flood coming. It was that they refused to see the state of their own hearts that made the flood necessary. Then came the shift in the wind, a subtle, chilling change that silenced the laughter in the valley. It began with the arrival of the beasts. From the horizons, a strange, silent migration commenced. Creatures of the wild, the cattle of the field, the birds of the air, and everything that crept upon the earth began to move with a singular, unnerving purpose. They came in pairs and in sevens, guided by an instinct deeper than fear, lining up at the massive ramp of the ark. The mockers must have watched in stunned, uneasy silence as apex predators walked alongside their prey, entering the dark belly of the wooden titan without a single sound of aggression. Nature was obeying its creator, while humanity remained stubbornly deaf. Once the final creature crossed the threshold and Noah's family stepped inside, the most terrifying sound of all occurred. The sound of a closing door. The text notes that Noah did not shut the door himself. The Lord shut him in. That massive portal of timber and pitch, the only entry point to salvation, was sealed by an unseen hand, drawing a definitive, irrevocable line between the past and the future. For 7 days, the ark sat silent in the dust. 7 days of agonizing anticipation inside, and perhaps a return to nervous laughter outside. But on the 17th day of the second month, the illusion of safety shattered forever. The cataclysm did not begin with a gentle rain. It began with an assault on the planet itself. The foundations of the great deep burst open, the earth fractured, and subterranean oceans roared upward in massive, violent geysers that tore through the crust of the valley. Simultaneously, the floodgates of heaven were opened, not as a storm, but as a torrential, unrelenting downpour that seemed as though the sky itself had dissolved. The dust of the valley turned to mud within minutes. The rivers breached their banks in an instant. The laughter vanished, replaced by a sudden, frantic scramble for high ground as the water rose with a terrifying mathematical certainty, lifting the massive ark off the desert floor for the very first time. The rise of the water was relentless, swallowing the hills, then the forests, and eventually the highest mountains under the heavens. For 40 days and 40 nights, the world was reduced to the deafening roar of falling water, the crashing of waves, and the absolute darkness of a ruined creation. Inside the ark, pitch black and tossed by the violent currents, 8 souls and the remnants of the animal kingdom listened to the destruction of everything they had ever known. Outside, the silence of a global graveyard took hold. The flood had washed away the violence, the noise, and the defiance, leaving behind nothing but a boundless, trackless ocean and a single wooden chest floating precariously on the face of the deep.